Okay, thank you everyone for joining us again for this session. Um, for those who missed our previous session, we had Sehar from Kenyans Come Home, and she was taking us through what you need to know if you're moving back home after working abroad. But then we realized a lot of the learnings that she gave was just really good for us in general. Okay, thank you everyone for confirming. Yeah, so if you missed that session, we will have all the recordings sent to all of you as long as we have your email address and possibly your phone number, by at least one of those. We should be able to get that through to you next week. So just sit tight. I think a lot of sessions are building upon each other. So for those who have been following along, they can see there are some common threads and trends in what we've been calling the theme of this event, which is the future of work. So speaking about the future of work, we are so privileged to have Doris Muigei. Doris is the country director here for Shortlist in Kenya. And Doris is very, very passionate about learning and development. Actually, she's very passionate generally about the future of work. And she's worked in HR, in learning development. She's worked in talent acquisition for over 13 years. She has been engaging in multi-sectoral engagements across Africa, and she's been leading discussions. And she has a very deep passion and desire for the next generation of African leaders. So today, Doris is going to be taking us through a lot about what we would maybe term the future of recruiting. Yeah, which is already here with us. So if you've used Shortlist before, let us know in the chat box. Yeah, but that is, a company that's really pioneering in that space. So we are very privileged to have her. So Doris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Beryl, and it's great to be here. There's a bit of construction going on. I can hear outside my house. I hope it doesn't. I hope there's not too much noise. And yes, good to be here, Wendy. It's really, really great to be back here again. I am going to take you through what I want. I'll share my screen. What can very loosely be called getting beyond the applicant tracking system, or as some may call it, beating the bots. I am privileged to work, obviously, in Shortlist, which is a platform where we are trying to see how we can place candidates with suitable employers, but also in a very scalable way. So we definitely use technology. So I have been privileged enough to work in a company where we are using technology. And so it got me really curious about what does this mean? What else is out there? And we also ourselves sell applicant tracking system called Shortlist Connect. So I can say I know a bit about it, but I wanted us to just discuss and see where this goes and whether you'll get any learnings from my experiences with the typical and many applicant tracking systems. So what we would definitely cover is I want to help you optimize your chances of getting screened in, and I'll talk about that a bit. The structure is 40 minutes of presentation and 20 minutes of question and answer. And I think for me, the goals is just for you to, and I don't want you to, it's not a geeky session where you have to absolutely know each and every single technology out there. But if you have a simple idea of what's out there and how you can leverage on that, very good. Also get into a bit of detail onto applicant tracking systems. So technology is technology. Even email can be considered technology. So we'll start at the basic ones and then we advance and see what are really the advanced methods that companies are using. And then we'll go into CVs and applicant tracking system. They have a very interesting relationship that you need to know when you're applying for jobs, because it doesn't matter how qualified you are. If your CV is not optimized to an applicant tracking system, it will kick you out. And also any other tech users. And I think I get a lot of questions from, so as Shortlist, probably some of you know this already. So we are, we obviously are a talent firm. We also handle executive level recruitment, but at the same time, we do mid-level and also a lot of the entry-level recruitments. An example is probably the Coca-Cola graduate recruitment program that we just ran in Kenya. We've run the KPMG graduate recruitment program for the last, 3 years. But also we do CEO level recruitment and CFO. And I think what I have seen with very senior level talent is I don't know what to say, this aversion to why should I put my CV in a black hole? And I don't know where it will go to. And I say true, absolutely. Ideally, at that level, you should have done the work to prepare, to network enough that you don't need to put your CV into an applicant tracking system. Absolutely. But there are also chances sometimes where either one, it is required by the business that every single application is advertised externally, or two, they've really tried through their connections and they are not making any success, and they come to shortlist and say, hey, we would like to hire this CFO. Can you help us find one? And we will use an applicant tracking system. Sometimes we do sometimes randomly get really good candidates through applicant tracking systems for very senior level. Some clients, for example, our applicant tracking systems are very cheap. Some clients just say, you will charge me so much money for an executive recruitment. Let's just try and see whether I can get a managing director through this applicant tracking system. And they do get managing directors. So I wouldn't say don't try and put in your application, but I would always ask you to first make sure you've networked and tried all your other avenues before you now do sort of a blind application, because they do work. About 40 to 50% of positions will be filled through recruiters and job advertisements, but the other 50% is just through networking. I'm sure Beryl has covered that extensively today. And so, yes, so here we are, you have seen a job. This is the situation that we're in now. You have seen a job, you can see that you're 50, let's say 60 to 70% qualified for it. And when I say 50 to 60% qualified, for ladies, I'm serious about it. You actually need to make sure that you're pushing yourself and not only looking at two things and saying, oh, I can't do that. And for gents, it's not that you're 20% qualified, but you've decided to buff it up and decide that you're now 60% qualified. You've seen something, you're confident, this is what you need. This is what your next level role should be like. The next thing is, okay, so how do I put in my application to make sure that I am screened in? Okay. Applicants tracking systems, and we'll go through this, and technology is designed to screen candidates out. It's not designed to screen you in. So their role is to make sure they get as many people outside as possible and as few in as possible. The recruiter's role is to make sure they're screening as many in as possible. So until you pass the applicant tracking system, which is a serious gatekeeper, you might not actually be able to be screened in by the recruiter for the role that you want. But we'll go through that in a bit more later. I wanted to first start by just helping you understand, because I am all for employee experience, and I sometimes get very frustrated that the first thing that a potential employee of my company, the first thing they meet is technology and not a human being. It's sad, it's frustrating. I wished it was any different, but unfortunately at the moment, it's an employer's market, absolutely. KRA advertised for a role last year, and I think they received about 43,000 applications for one position. Just let that sink in, 43,000 applications. A big chunk of them are probably qualified, but there's a big chunk of them there who've read too many self-help books, and they have decided that they're going to soldier in and make sure and try their best to go through whether they are qualified or not. And so with that in mind, then it becomes extremely difficult for them to be able to screen one by one for all that. So that's just really the reality of it. The other side is, I remember a CEO telling me they advertised for a CFO role and attracted 1,500 applications. I didn't even know there are 1,500 CFOs in Kenya. That was an issue. And he says most of them are pretty qualified. I mean, he didn't have to struggle. So you're a CEO who is trying to recruit, and you have 1,500 applications to go through. Your KRA here, who has 43,000 applications to go through, some of them pretty solid and some of them not so solid. There's two options here. You can decide to do what, and I know it's usually a joke, but it's serious, what we used to say in university when they say that the professor puts your papers on the stairs, and based on where your paper lands, it's A, B, C. So you can decide to use your email. And I've seen a lot of recruiters say, Doris, they come in, and based on the day that I am there, those are the ones I see. Anybody that didn't come on the day that I decided to sit down, I don't even look at those CVs. That's a reality. Or we could use technology to make sure that the people who needed to actually be seen by the recruiter are seen, because it's an extremely objective process. So I guess for me today, I am pro technology. There are times when I am thinking that we are probably overusing it, but for the benefit of this discussion is how do I help you get your CV into and it to be screened. So again, this is, I think we all know this, but just to be aware that 60 to 70% of the CVs will not be seen by a human. Again, because as I said, it's an employer's market. The numbers are really, it's a lot of numbers, and most people can't be able to see all that. So unfortunately, that's just the reality of that. So the first thing, and so there's different varieties of technology, and we've advanced over time. Internationally and across globally, they have really advanced and are probably primarily 80 to 90% of companies use applicant tracking system. In Kenya, I would say probably 30 to 40% of companies use applicant tracking systems. It is increasing, but it's definitely not at that point. So chances are some of your applications will be sending your CV on email. And so it is technology. I don't think it's the best technology, but then how can you optimize that you send your CV on email and actually someone gets to review that CV? Sorry, I don't have two screens today, so I kind of have to come back here to see some of the comments. To review that CV. So if you're sending your CV through if you're sending your CV through an email, I can't even sit here and tell you there's a hard and fast rule and then that they are tricks to it. All I can say is that because it is going to be screened by a human, how can you optimize it in a way that if they do come across it, which is really unfortunate to say, but the reality, they are in 10 seconds, they can quickly be able to scan through and say, okay, I can see why this person is fit for the position. This is probably the only time I would ask you to make your CV look beautiful. In an applicant tracking system, that's not the case. But in here, how do you make sure that your CV is presentable, it's concise, it just looks really presentable and has all the information, but it's still attractive to the eye? Sometimes that someone is like, okay, you know what, this person has spent a bit more time and effort into thinking about their CV, I might consider them. Also for CV, I would say also the body that you use for your email is extremely important. A lot of people, and I get so frustrated by this, and I guess it's just lack of learning, is you send your CV, you have no body attached. You just say, please find my CV for this position. You have a whole real estate of the body of the email that you have left, that you haven't used, to just very, very quickly and succinctly explain why you're fitted for the role. And in summary, give your CV in almost even 50 words to say, I have worked in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places, and this is why I think I'm suitable for this position. That is what I would say for me. I struggle when we don't take advantage of that whole email and real estate that is there. Again, how do you make sure that you do not completely you don't overwrite? So make it concise, make it to the point, and make it that it's attractive, that if someone does go through that, they're able to give your CV sort of a second glance. That is what I would say for sending your CV. Someone else had asked me once, what is the best time to send your CV when you're just sending it to an email address? I don't know if there are any other recruiters in the room who hiring managers. The people I have spoken to, unfortunately, because again, it's an employer's market, they don't really have a time. In fact, the people who are able to make it through a CV screening are people who, when they notice that they're very suitable for the role, they try to reach out to the hiring manager to attract their attention, to say, hey, I am sending my CV, this is who I am, and why I think I am suitable. Because every time I ask recruiters this question, they tell you, Doris, it depends. Sometimes I wake up and I have 1 hour. So based on the people that I come across, for that 1 hour, I'll screen them. Where I reach, if I have enough candidates, that's it. Some of them are very, very systematic. They will put it in an Excel sheet and have an intern just make sure they've scored and put all the experiences. Like they're trying to turn this into a very effective and efficient system. In that case, it doesn't really matter what time you send in your CV. As long as your experiences are well articulated, you should be able to be taken to the next stage. I don't know whether there are any questions until there.
No, none. I'm just seeing someone with my name saying they have used shortlist to apply and the bot beat them. So they're really looking forward to learning.
Yay. Okay, great. All right, so that is the CV, sending your CV an email. The other one that is slightly more advanced is when there are some people who have, say, for example, someone like Technobrain and a few other companies have what we call homemade CV screening. So what they do, and even shortlist, by the way, shortlist, this is probably where we use, where our technology for applicant tracking systems currently is. We are not yet at the AI, the really CV passing where Fuzu is. We are probably here at knockout questions. So what happens here is that a hiring manager is very clear about the criteria they want. So they will be clear on the salary, years of experience, the key skills, sometimes the industries. And then these questions are included in the application process. So that when you see, they ask you how many years of experience do you have, where do you live, all those things are very, very critical. In shortlist, it's a chatbot. And based on how you answer, it determines very, very quickly whether you need to continue with the process or do we not waste your time. And for knockout questions, my ask is, and I don't think we do enough of this. So review the JD or advert and focus on certain words. Like if there's anything that says must, and if you don't have it, chances are very high that it'll probably kick you out. Preferred is also a good one to have. So focus on words or or words that have been repeated a few times. You know that must be very, very important for that role. If it says 6 to 7 years of experience in a certain aspect, chances are if you don't have that, because the knockout questions will ask you that, chances are it will still kick you out anyway. Because we usually, ideally, tell hiring managers to be as exact as possible. But to be fair, in most systems, including the one for shortlist, it does ask you, are you open to review candidates outside these criteria? So say, for example, you had 3 years of experience, a hiring manager can say, okay, I'm happy to review 2 years and maybe 4 to a certain extent. That can also be there. Another thing that is very important is just the time, and I know Beryl must have stressed this during the session, but the time and the preparation. So if your knockout questions is not timed, some of them are not timed. I don't even think the shortlist one is. It's not timed unless it's the ability assessments. I would ask that you copy paste the questions to a Word document and then take time thinking about the responses. So because again, this is your probably only chance. And as I said, I will repeat this many times so that we all understand. You're only doing this because you have noticed that you're 60 to 80% qualified for the job based on the must-haves. So you're happy to take the time it requires for it to be done. I can tell you now, do not copy from the internet. Our recruiters are very good. And there's a way the internet writes that other people don't write. So what we do is we just copy it, we take it into a scanner, and it tells us exactly where you found those statements on the internet. And the thing is, you just won't hear from us. We will just regret you. No one will ever give you feedback as to why. And people have moved on. And you probably might have been very qualified. It's just that you probably just didn't have time. Again, grammar. I think we all know this. Before submitting, check everything. Use Grammarly, Word document, whatever you can, but just check everything before submitting. Because a hiring manager at this point, especially at the beginning of the application, is looking for a way, like the computer, to screen you out. Anything small that will give them a little bit of doubt, they will screen you out because they're thinking, there are 5,000 candidates. If I miss this one, so the next one will come through. And it might just be because you missed a comma somewhere. So take your time and check that you've done everything that you needed to do for that. Are there any questions so far on screening? Yes, Wendy. Wendy has a question.
Maybe Doris, as Wendy asks her question, there's a question we do have, and it's for For those who are seeking to change careers, so let's say I am in finance management and I'd like to move to operations management.
Yes.
Are you saying that these types of systems are not friendly to such individuals because they may not have, let's say, the requisite experience in that function or that sort of thing?
That's a really good question. Yes, I keep saying if you're pivoting, the worst thing you want is an applicant tracking system. Because you're competing with the people I have just told if you're 80% qualified for the job. Remember those ones. So you're competing with people who already are really, really good. They don't need stories. Pivoting requires storytelling, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but in a realistic way, to help you explain why you think this is suited for you. You can probably even do the job better than this person who is 80% qualified, but it's just that you probably will not go through. And I'll say this again, if you're pivoting, if you're moving to a slightly different direction, spend time, effort, understanding the companies you want to work, reach out to them so that even by the time they're advertising and asking you to get into the applicant tracking system, they know your application is going to be there. And even if you don't pass some of that, like even in shortlist, if a hiring manager tells me, please release that person who didn't pass, you're able to pass through. But spend time and do the work it takes to be able to be known before you apply into an applicant tracking system. So yes, in summary, I would say it's probably not the best. Okay, let me read Wendy's question. Yes, that's the next thing we are going into, Wendy. That's the next thing we're going into. So we'll go through that in a bit more detail in a few. So if there are no other questions on just the hard filters and questions, I'll go into the next thing, which is now, which is keywords. Yes. Keywords. So again, so we have talked about sending your CV on email to a hiring manager. We've talked about some companies who use hard filter questions to go through. And then there are companies, including Shortlist, and probably, I would say in Kenya, if anybody has an applicant tracking system, about 50 to 60% of them use keywords. So you go into the system, you search HR analytics, for lack of a better word, and based on the CVs that come out from that keyword, and then now you shortlist or you review those CVs again. And I think, and the keywords again will be mixed with the applicant tracking system. So we'll go through all of them together in the next thing. So there's keywords, and then now there's the typical applicant tracking, automatic resume scoring. Resume scoring again is a system, I think even fools will use it, where once you dump in your CV, based on all the words in your CV, it very, very quickly tells us to what extent you're suitable for that role. Also, Talio does it, and I'll show you some of the applicant tracking systems, which is the Safaricom one. It just very quickly tells a recruiter, based on what they have written, I think they are 50 to 60% qualified for that job. So obviously, you can imagine a recruiter will try as much as possible to go for the 80-90% qualifications and not anybody else. So now I'd like us to get more into the applicant tracking system. So I think I've talked about this a lot, but it's supposed to extract information from your CV and build a digital CV, for lack of a better word. But it's important is to know that the goal is to quickly call out anyone who is underqualified in order to make the applicant pool smaller and sometimes identify top candidates. Okay, so this is sort of the use of an applicant tracking system. It's not moving. Okay, as you can see here very quickly, there's a lot that goes in, it mixes, there's a lot of things in.
Your screen has gone off, so you need to reshare.
I wonder why. Is it there now?
Perfect.
Yay. Okay, great. So there's many ways and different varieties of an applicant tracking system, and we will not. The goal for today is not to make you to convert you into a recruiter or a tech geek. Is to just give you very, very quick understanding of what those are. So these are some of the examples of applicant tracking systems. Talio is an Oracle applicant tracking system used by a lot. Safaricom, KRA, most of them use Talio. Obviously, Shortlist Connect is our own inbuilt applicant tracking system that uses a lot of keywords and also uses the chatbot. Talio mostly uses keywords. Greenhouse is used by people like MasterCard Foundation. I think also Andela use Greenhouse. It's the new kid on the block. The beauty about Greenhouse is that it doesn't really focus a lot on keywords because keywords are very misleading, unfortunately. And I'll show you how to cheat keywords. There's a system, there's places where you go, you just dump the job description and you dump your JD, your CV, and it helps you figure out the keywords. So Greenhouse has moved away from that. Obviously, there is also Brighter Monday, which I think also uses AI. There's Jazz, there's Fuzu. Fuzu are very big on passing and keywords and just resume scoring. And there's also Workable. Workable and Workday. I think EABL also use Workday. I don't think it's important to know which system a company uses. I really, really don't think it's necessary. But in case you ever want to know, if you go to EABL careers, for example, I hope you can all still see my screen. Opportunities, I hope it shows up. Which cookies? It's giving me too much drama. And so here, you see here at the top, you're able to see Talio, Greenhouse. So it moves it into that particular screening tool. But again, as I said, I don't think it's very necessary for you to know what kind of applicant tracking system that someone is using. I don't think it's very, for shortlist, companies that are using us are companies like Java, for example, use, there's actually many of them, but Java is a good example of one that uses Shortlist Connect applicant tracking system. Sorry. Okay, so how do we make sure that your resume is what I call ATS proof? Again, I think this has been said, I'm sure this week more than once, but tailor your CV to the JD every single time you apply. 80% of the time, it's going to be the same thing, but there's a 20% tweaking here and there that is absolutely important for you to tailor. So make sure that you have spent, remember keywords is what is going to make a difference for a lot of the applicant tracking systems. So make sure you've spent the time to do that. And then there's a way, and I'll share this at the end of this, there are places where you can actually optimize for applicant tracking system. And so you can actually go into a place, dump your CV, it will show you keywords and job description and see to what extent you match that job description. I want to specifically say here, don't cheat. Because if you put in all the keywords that you think they're supposed to be put in, and then the screening goes, and then yes, you're screened in, remember you're going to find a recruiter who looks at your CV and gives it one glance and realizes this is all orchestrated and puts it on the side. And then recruiters, by the way, we are very good at blacklisting. We will blacklist you and you will never know. So be as honest as possible as you're doing that. So again, that is important. When you're using in your CV, another thing that is important to make sure you pass through an applicant tracking system. So the long form and acronym version. So Masters of Business Administration, if the job application said MBA, continue, but also just put Masters of Business Administration in brackets. If your CV has SEO, please make sure you also have the long form search engine optimization. Avoid acronyms as much as you can because not all of them are optimized to be able to identify this. Remember, this is a bot. It doesn't later ask you by the SEO in a so they'll just move through that. CV for an applicant tracking system. And I want to stress this. You see all those beautiful CVs we tell you to make with your picture and applicant tracking systems do not care for those. In fact, the more basic your CV, the better. In fact, ideally should be in Word with very, very few types of fonts. So sometimes, because you remember it passes through your CV, scans very quickly and identifies whether it needs to take you to the next stage. So if it meets a table and something and it probably doesn't identify, it'll either miss a lot of your keywords because you put them in a nice, beautiful table that it did not even notice was there, or it just passed through that. So that, but also just chronological order. So avoid functional resumes, and I'll tell you why. So when a hiring manager says, I am looking for an accountant with 3 years experience in audit, an applicant tracking system will go into your CV, it will search the keywords for audit, and then it will match that to the time. Say you said you worked in shortlist for 2 years, and you put the time there. That is the time it will take. If there's no other keyword for audit anywhere else in your CV, it's only going to take 2 years. And obviously, you don't have enough experience. So functional resumes don't really work because the ATS needs to be able to capture the timelines within your resume. As I said, again, don't use tables or columns. They just have a lot of errors with that. Font. Applicant tracking systems are not really good at all these fancy things we do. Try and keep it as easy. Helvetica, Garamond, Georgia, Arial. Keep it as simple as you can all throughout. Sometimes ATSs also miss headers and footers. Some people put their address there and a lot of things that are very, very critical. So if you're using an applicant tracking system that, and you know, especially something like Talio, like Greenhouse, I would ask that you put all your information in the body and very little information, if any, into the footers. Something else that is important: use section headings that are very, very, very clear. Work experience. It's nice, but where I've been, where my passion lies, is not really going to pass. It's a bot, it's a computer. It just knows work experience. Another thing, if your role is actually customer service manager, but you're called customer happiness manager, while we love the customer happiness manager title, the bot will not even understand what that is. So you put customer happiness manager and then bracket customer service manager. You're trying to make it as simple as possible for the applicant tracking system to understand you know what you're going through there. So yes, you can have the fancy titles and all that, but keep it as simple as possible. And by the way, even LinkedIn has an applicant tracking system. So this is not just for when you're applying for some of these jobs. When you're applying to some of them, even up to at LinkedIn, all this is actually still applicable. And then when you're saving your CV and when you're uploading your CV, look at the applicant tracking system and see what it tells you. Some of them tell you to include PDF. Great. If it does not tell you that it is PDF enabled, please always send your CV in Word. It is extremely important. Especially the old school applicant tracking systems, and unfortunately in Kenya, the ones I see are really, really old school, especially in the large organizations and government. It doesn't read a PDF. And if it reads, it will read some information and not some information, and you might, in there, your key skills might be passed. So just send it in a Word.doc if possible, but even in a normal Word document should be able to do. I will stop here because I have spoken a lot, and just ask you guys questions, see if there are any other areas in an applicant tracking system that you want us to cover. And Wendy, let me know if I have now covered your question.
I can see Wendy has a follow-up.
Yes, Wendy, yes, most applicant tracking systems have automated emails, I'll be honest. Shortlist, we are very big on telling you something, even if it's just you have not made it or please wait. And a lot of them do still have that. So most of them do have the automated emails that come to you. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, there's another question. Actually, this is a general question for LinkedIn. For those people who have happiness, that company-specific title that is not very, it's kind of nebulous. What would you advise them on LinkedIn to do so that, because LinkedIn using the same kind of system, basically?
Yes, that's a really good question. I would still ask them to put a bracket. to bracket the real, especially if you're starting to job search. You can just say customer happiness and then just put customer service there, because when a recruiter is looking, so as a recruiter, when we go to the back end of LinkedIn, we have something we call talent insights, where we go in and we put all possible job titles for customer service. And if your title is not very common, LinkedIn is not aware, it will not suggest to me as a recruiter that that is a common title. So I'll quickly miss it. But if you had put it in brackets as that, then it becomes very easy for me to be able to find it. So bracket it as much as you can. Well, Kista, I'll answer your questions later on once we are done with questions around the applicant tracking system. I guess also for me, my question for everybody listening is, what have been your experiences so far with applicant tracking systems? Who has been successful with them? Who has not? Who likes them? Who doesn't? Who wishes that all CVs would be looked at by human beings? I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, especially if you're at very senior level. So Wendy's question. Okay, so Wendy asks if the systems save users' data for future use. Yes, they do. At Shortlist, we have very, very strict GDPR requirements. We have to pass a lot of data privacy and data security. So a lot of recruiters are required to go through that. So I would always just find out if the company you're dealing with is GDPR compliant. Most of them really are, because again, for us, we work with multinationals and it would be hard for us to work without that. So they use your data for future use, and they usually ask you if they're able to. I'll give you an example. In Shortlist, 50%, a lot of positions we don't even advertise because we already have people in our database. So if you're already in our database and we think that you meet that criteria, we'll just quickly go in and start the search, and we find you and we present you to the client. Sometimes then we have to recruit, but not all the time. So the beauty of having your profile in a recruiter's applicant tracking system, for lack of a better word, or database, is the fact that not all our jobs are advertised. Sometimes a client wants someone in 3 days. We don't have time to advertise. We're going to go in there, find people who are good, and just send them the profiles as they are. Kevin, so what specific question do you have, Kevin, on keywords? If you could just clarify that a bit, and then I will answer. And then Maureen asks on security, what are your thoughts on those that ask for current remuneration details? Recruiters are going to kill me for this. So there is no law that requires you to tell someone how much you're earning. But there's also no law that requires someone to hire you when you have not told them that. So it's one of those. A lot of companies ask because they want to gauge. Unfortunately, it's sometimes a good or a bad thing, because they really want to see whether they can afford you. And they don't want to waste your time, you shouldn't be wasting their time. A lot of them also, unfortunately, if you're below salary, sometimes you're feeling, okay, then if I'm below salary, what is it? How then are you going to, you might pay me according to where I am instead of where I want to go? It's a very, very tricky question. I would say if you're extremely qualified, extremely good at what you do, and we have them in our database and sometimes we speak to them, you don't have to give anyone your salary. But you have to be outstanding. But if you're the rest of us who are just hustling to get a job, just give that information as much as you can. So no one is requiring you. And a recruiter would probably not screen you out, at least not at Shortlist for it. But sometimes it just makes your life easy. On the Fuzu, yes, Fuzu is extremely genuine. I would not say that enough. It is a worthy competitor, but extremely genuine in what they're doing. ATS systems. Yes, Susan, I completely agree with you. They are a bit frustrating. But if you do, as I said, if you are qualified based on that job, guys, I don't think, we did a research, and maybe this is important. We did it. So our system can be able to very quickly see how long you're spending on JDs. it's sometimes 30 seconds, and it's very frustrating, and I worry because you cannot be able to spend 30 seconds on a JD and decide to apply. Yes, you can, of course you can, but you're missing so much. I would say spend time understanding the job, spend time understanding the company, spend time understanding the job before you apply. Sometimes I even tell people, copy paste it, put it on a Word document, and just, especially if you think you're really, really qualified, and really, really understand it. And again, I'll say this, ideally, by the time you're applying, you should have known someone internally, even one person, but if you can't, then just really, really prepare well for it. Yeah. So I've answered, I have done assessments test on Brighter Monday, but I failed a good one. Oh, Pole Consolata. I don't think it's, so this is a really good question. Consolata, I am an industrial psychologist by training and by profession. There is no wrong and right in a lot of these things. It's, are you right for that job? That same assessment can be used for another job and you can still be qualified. And I'm sure the Profile International's ladies covered this a bit. Unless it's a cognitive assessment test, which is, it is really it's either right or wrong. Most of this is just for that particular context, you might not have been the right one. Will this be saved in an applicant tracking system? Consolata, yes. Will we use it for another client? Very rarely, because it's confidential data that belongs to another client. A lot of the clients give us those assessments. A lot of them are context specific, so we rarely use them, unless it's something like a psychometric or a cognitive assessment test. That one will be used across. What would you say are advantages of ATS to job applicants? I know this may not sound true, but it is probably more objective than a recruiter. There's no way a recruiter can go through 43,000. Yes, absolutely. And I really like that introspection, Mindy, around the reality is, and I know most of you are hiring managers, it's just hard to be able to go through all those CVs. It's almost impossible. So anything that can make it efficient does. But in reality, not many of us want to. I don't want technology to be my first experience with my dream company. I want it to be another human being. So my answer is try and make sure it's another human being through networking. But if you can't, then how can some of these tips help you make the best out of that experience? Yeah. Yay, Beryl, I'm glad that majority of your experience have been good. And if you feel free to even share more on exactly specifically some of what has worked for you. So yes, you can actually be able to optimize using keywords until you actually make sure that you have gone for those interviews. Yeah. So Kevin has a really good question around keywords and how do you make sure you've included enough? What's that thing called? You know the cloud, Beryl, and help me here. You know the cloud thing that you go in and you put your CV and then it brings up all the words. I don't know what it's called, but
Job scan.
Yes. Or even you can go to job scan, or you can even go to any cloud, any word cloud. Dump your CV in a word cloud, see what keywords are coming out. This is the easiest way. And then take that same job description and dump it in that same word cloud and see what comes up, what words are strike you the most. That's, for me, the easiest way to do it. That's number one. So, and then based on the words that are really, really striking, make sure your CV has those. But then there's another thing also. It's around quality and quantity. The more words are used in a job description, the more important it is. But also where those words are used are very important. If, let's say, for example, let me say SEO optimization was a key criteria, but you put it in your key competencies, but it's nowhere in your CV. An applicant tracking system is trained to say that anything that doesn't have a date based on your experience, give it only 6 months. So it's the where you place the words. You have to place them in the body, especially when they're very, very critical, in the body of your experience. But also you can also free to place them in the key competencies that you have. But you can't just put them in the key competencies and forget to include them in the main body, because an applicant tracking system looks at the main body, and based on that, on your experience in that company, that is how much experience you have in that particular skill. Yeah. So Veronica, we'll go through that question in a bit. Okay. So we have 3 questions that are out of the applicant tracking system, and I'm happy to cover them. But are there any other questions around applicant tracking system? Applicant tracking system? Any other questions?
I actually see another one from Wendy.
Wendy. I don't, that's a really good question. I actually don't have an answer to that. I don't think that they're not designed to compare candidates. I think that's a good thing. They're designed, and in psychology, that's what we also do. You're asked to compare someone's CV to the job, very rarely to another candidate. So I don't think they're intelligent enough to be able to see whether you've copied. I guess what one would do is it would just say you have the exact same score as Doris, who also applied for this job. But in terms of it comparing, no applicant tracking system will, and I don't think they should. It's about comparison to a job, not another person. So Alice, I don't know what your question is around how someone should structure their CV. So maybe if you could qualify that a bit. I'll go down and answer the question from Wilkistan. So this is a more general question. I hope you guys don't mind. So if you resign from a job because of your dislike for the company and the managers, can you disclose this at your next interview? Yes and no. Yes, in a very objective way that explains why you left, but no in a way if you have bile. No hiring manager wants to hear bile. You have to be mature enough to be able to say it in a way that is respectful to the company where you are, that is respectful for those people, for them to imagine that, okay, chances are you're mature enough about that conversation. So the how you speak is important. Wilkista, I have people who sometimes I train on why they left. It's a whole training, and I don't want you to take it lightly. You need to write it down. You need to practice it in a way that makes sure that you don't have bile by the time you go for your next interview. So it's important to practice it, and don't ignore what it takes to just be able to craft a story that is objective, but also explains yourself in a way that people can see, okay, maybe there was another story there. Yeah, so it needs a lot of work, and I would ask you to put in the work for that. There was another question. I know Beryl, how many more minutes do I have?
Since it's the last session, it's up to you, honestly. Yeah, however much time you'd like.
Okay. On remuneration, how do you know what range they're looking for? Hey, you can't. Again, I know I say this, and I'm sorry I say it many times. I prefer people who have done their homework. If you're applying to EABL, you have found someone in EABL who knows how much that salary is earning. That's my first thing, always. I will always ask you to make sure you know a bit about the company before you apply. And if you can't, you just put in what do you think you're worth. So usually I tell people between 20 to 30, 40% over and above what they're earning. That's the safest bet I would give you. But otherwise, I would ask you to do the work to find out their remuneration structure. Veronica, why is it so hard for employers to hire an entry-level manager? They always request managers with experience. I understand, and it's frustrating, and it's a really, really good question. But there's just, especially at the lower level, there's something and it's frustrating, but it's true, we call it plug and play. So by the time we're looking for a manager, we need someone who has that experience already, because it's just easy, and there's probably less mistakes and less stumbles along the way. But I think also There's so many ways of being a manager that you don't necessarily have to be given the title. I keep telling people, find ways to be a manager, volunteer in projects that are going to make you a manager. So get an intern and say you're managing an intern. Just be creative around how you're becoming a manager. I don't think waiting for a title, because most people are not looking for you to have that title. They're looking for you to have experience in being a manager more than necessarily the title that you're a manager. I think I've already answered your second question. Managerial level positions. First, understand. I think for me, it's understand why you want to be a manager. It's extremely important. And I know it sounds like a really, really easy question, because once you understand why, is it because you like leading people? Is it because it's for you, it is important to be seen at that level? What is it that makes you want to be a manager? And once you've understood that a bit, what avenues then within your current company will give you that? So there are avenues, and as I say, there are avenues to be a manager without necessarily having that title. And then when you've done it in a while, you can be able to apply to another place and say, listen, this is the kind of managerial skills that I have at this time. Alice, I don't know whether you followed. Alice, I still don't get your question. Alice, I don't get your question really well. But I'll continue for now. So a resume, Stacy, is your little very quick profile, and a CV is the more extended marketing tool, because I call a CV a marketing tool. What I would say is my CV is everything that I need to tell different employers. So I will make sure that all my skills and experiences, there's as many as, it's probably 6-7 pages. I don't mind it being as long as possible, because that is where I pick up every time I need to apply for a different job. Resume on the other side is a very short, concise, sometimes 1 page, max 2 pages about yourself that you need to be able to send to employers. Yeah. So again, Caroline, the stages to an ATS are different, and it really does depend from one to another. I wouldn't be able to say there's many stages, and it depends. It's really finding out, are they giving you feedback? And what are some, unfortunately, your CV just goes into a black hole and you never hear back from them. And then some of them would actually tell you what stages you're at. Yes, Wendy, I agree. Oh, interesting question, Caroline. Does an ATS identify lapse? No, it doesn't identify lapse. Not that I know. This is a really interesting question. I'm going to find out this more. It doesn't identify gaps, but the recruiter, this person called a recruiter, will identify that gap. And if you have not spent time explaining the gap, they will quickly remove your CV to the side. So it's important to always never, and I think I said this in my last session, don't ignore a gap. Talk about it, be upfront about it. That way, it's very, very easy for the recruiter to understand your gap. Do recruiters reach out to those who have? So, general principle, and I can tell you this for shortlist, if we have placed you, we are not coming for you. I can tell you that for sure. We don't dip in the same pond. And so unless you apply for a job yourself, we would not be able to reach out and tell you whether you're interested. But if you do apply, it's a free world. You have a choice to leave your employment. You will go through the process, but we will never actively seek you for you to apply for another job. And most recruiters do the same. It's just does favor someone employment over someone who has not really consolata. Again, remember, an ATS's role is to find out how you fit a certain criteria. In fact, this is the best way for you to be screened in, because if you have the right criteria for that job, whether you had a gap or not, it doesn't really bother them at that point. Yes. But remember also, recent experience counts. I don't think most ATSs look at anything more than 10 years. So it has to be recent experience. When you say you have a database for applicants, does this mean the only ones are? Yes, Rehab, a little bit, especially for shortlist, because because right now you can easily put in your CV without a job, but before this, all our applications were based on a job. So if the applicant tracking system kicked you out before you were able to go through the whole process, chances are we don't have a lot of that information. But remember also, we always ask you to create a profile and make sure your CV is saved in your profile. So if your CV is there, then maybe it's not necessary. Would a gap to try business affect your chances of employment? Caroline, no. I wouldn't say that. It depends on who you're going to hire. If you go into, say, for example, there's some clients who sometimes say, if that person has not tried their own business, don't bring them here. I know, especially startups. Startups really, really are excited and fascinated and want to work with people who have tried, because you know better than anyone else what it takes to run a business. And so to me, I have seen clients who have refused to hire people who have never done their own business because they say they don't identify with the realities of work. So it's actually a plus. Make sure you align it to a place where it's a plus. So if you're probably applying to government, and with all due respect to everybody here from government, chances are they might not be excited by it. But if it's a startup, if it's a retail, if it's an SME, that is something that they might really, really be excited by. How do I know my CV passed an ATS? Again, depending on the applicant tracking system, ideally, some of them should be able to tell you whether you've passed or not. They should be able to give you a message. Unfortunately, not everybody has the candidate experience as the thing they value. And sometimes you're just in a black hole for as long as you can imagine. Yeah. Cool. I think this is it, Beryl. I don't know whether you have any other comments. I can see there are so many other questions that are probably related to, not related to, but we will answer Alice's because she had really asked. And then after, I think this is the last one.
No problem.
Okay, Alice, I think speak to Beryl on this question, because I think it's hard for me to be able to explain all that in this session, considering it was really about the applicant tracking system. And then Beryl can see whether she can direct you to one of her coaches or someone who can help you really structure your CV. I want to say this. Your job is not to do a good CV. Your job is to do your job well. The same way companies hire marketing managers to be able to sell their product is the same way you should not feel bad getting someone else to help you with your CV. That's not the only recruiters and people whose work is CV writing should be good at CVs. Everybody else should be helped. The same way companies are helped every day to market their brands. It's probably controversial, but I think don't be too hard on yourself if you're not doing a good CV well. Just give it to someone else to help you with. There are people who, and I'm sure Beryl can show you, give you a few people who can be able to help with your CV at a cost, but it's probably the best money you spent if they do it well. Beryl, I think that's it for me.
All right, Doris, thank you so much. I really appreciate the candid feedback, and some of it was very difficult to hear. But I appreciate it because I think many people take for granted just how many things they need to be very wary of in the job search process, and they get so frustrated, and they don't know what's tripping them up. Yeah, so I think for me, the three things I would really want to just stress is the point of this career summit is for you to, number one, just understand that if you're not self-aware and you don't have very specific career goals, you apply to every job, there's a problem, and it's probably what's keeping you where you are. So you need to, basically there's some self-work that needs to be done. Secondly, I don't know if, Doris, you didn't stress this enough, but I just want to reiterate it. It is so important to understand that it's not just recruiting systems that you need to focus on, especially at higher level jobs. You really need to work your network. Yeah, the earlier you catch a job, I think the better it is always. And then lastly, I think, it's just self-reflection at every point. We've covered a lot of this in other sessions because people, recruiters are getting the exact same questions time and time again, issues. And so from the 3 recruiters we've spoken to today and even before, I'm sure you've picked up that it's exactly the same thing being said. And what we really want is for people to appreciate that you don't just search for a job. Really, it's much more than that. Yeah. So with that, we will be sending the recordings next week again. As long as we have you on register, yes, we don't have an ETS. As long as we have you on our email database, you will get the recordings. And I would like you to really go through them. Yeah. And go through them with an open mind. Don't be in denial. It is what it is. Just accept and change. That's the easiest thing I think we can do for ourselves. And then there is going to be a training manual, a training program that's launched next week as well. So you'll be able to learn more about that. For those people who are asking questions about interviewing and CV writing and LinkedIn, that's quite detailed, and it's so tailored to so many things, your level, the job, etc. So please be on the lookout for those things. Just make sure you're checking your email towards the end of the week. Yeah. But I just want to thank you so much, Doris. You've been I think you've been very genuine. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I think people should really take what you've said to heart, even though it may pinch a little. Yeah. So Doris, I don't know if you want to share maybe how guys can connect with you, maybe LinkedIn or something.
Yes, you can. I will put my email address here. You can connect with me on email. Yes, you can connect with me on email if you have any questions. Yeah, just and we can connect and see. I want to say now, I am probably not the best person to connect with on a job placement perspective, because there's a really good team of recruiters. I would ask you any day to connect with them directly. Mine would probably be more on your job strategy and things like that, and less on unless there's a job I really know is active. Chances are half the time, to be honest, I don't really know the ones that are running unless I am the one running them, which is very few of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So in other words, if you're going to see Doris, it's going to be thinking work, to kind of work together what it is that could be done. But I would also say, out of respect, please, when you reach out to Doris, do some of the homework yourself. Actually listen to the sessions and do something. Don't just reach out blindly and the information had already been shared. I think that would be disrespectful. So thank you very much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So if you realize the theme of the Career Summit, we have gone through everything from the future of work, self-awareness. We've covered all of the things you need to do to, make time for your own personal development, whether in your personal life or your professional life. We've talked about emotional well-being, to make time for yourself. That was yesterday. Today, Doris and everyone else has said exactly the same thing. You need to be very careful with the recruiting process and the things you need to really look out for. And then tomorrow, we're talking about the 3 key skills that are for the future of work. And this covers every single job level, every single career. These are the most common things you're going to need to know. Creativity, networking, and public speaking. So please join us. Yeah. But other than that, thank you so much, everyone. And I hope to see you tomorrow and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.